fraction of a second on her lips before meeting her gaze again. "And because I protect what is mine. Welcome to the Costello Syndicate." Clara woke up the next morning, not on a frozen bus bench, but in the sprawling master guest suite of a penthouse overlooking the Houston skyline. The storm had broken, leaving a crisp, brilliant morning in its wake. On the foot of the king-sized bed sat 3 large boxes from a high-end boutique on the magnificent Mile. Inside were tailored silk blouses, cashmere sweaters, and bespoke wool trousers, all meticulously sized for her 280-pound frame. Artan Costello had not sent her a treadmill or a passive-aggressive diet book. He had sent a tailor's measurements to the best clothiers in the city. When she finally emerged, dressed in a sharp, emerald-green silk blouse and black trousers that draped flawlessly, she found Artan at a massive mahogany dining table spread with financial documents. He looked up his dark eyes, taking her in. He didn't make a crude comment or offer a patronizing compliment. He simply nodded, pulling out a chair beside him. "You look ready to work, Clara. Have a seat." Over the next 3 weeks, Clara's life underwent a seismic shift. The woman who had cowered under David's verbal abuse vanished, replaced by the brilliant financial architect she was always meant to be. Artan gave her unfettered access to the Costello Syndicate's sprawling network of legitimate businesses and illicit cash flows. He gave her a secure server, unlimited coffee, and absolute autonomy. She wasn't treated as a secretary or a burden. She was Artan's secret weapon. "They're using a fractional reserve mirroring technique," Clara explained one late evening, pointing to a labyrinth of highlighted spreadsheet rows. Artan stood behind her chair, his sheer proximity sending a now familiar rush of heat through her chest. "Someone on the inside is slicing micro-percentages off the top of your casino revenues and routing them through a mid-level corporate asset management firm. It's brilliant, honestly. By the time the money hits the shell companies in Panama, it looks like standard corporate dividends." Artan leaned closer, his hand resting casually on the back of her chair. "Do you have a name?" "I have 2, Clara said, her voice steadying despite the adrenaline. She tapped the screen. "The internal authorization codes belong to your underboss Dominic Gallo." Artan's jaw tightened. A cold, terrifying silence filled the penthouse. Dominic had been his right hand for a decade. And the second name? Clara swallowed hard, pulling up a secondary document. She had stared at it for an hour before Artan walked in her mind, reeling from the bitter irony of the universe. The external asset management firm laundering Dominic's stolen money is Meridian Financial. Specifically, the accounts are being signed off by their newly appointed regional director. Artan's eyes narrowed as he read the name on the screen. David Rossi. The silence stretched. Artan looked from the monitor to Clara, reading the storm of emotions in her eyes. "Your husband." "Ex-husband," Clara corrected her voice, trembling with a mixture of shock and long-dormant rage. "He got his promotion 3 weeks ago, the exact same time these massive authorizations started pushing through. David isn't a criminal mastermind, Artan. He's an arrogant, ambitious fool. Dominic Gallo is using him as a blind mule, and David is too busy enjoying the perks to look at the ledgers he's rubber-stamping." Artan walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the glittering grid of Houston. When he finally turned back, the look in his eyes was lethal, yet specifically protective when it landed on her. "Dominic will be handled by me," Artan said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "But David belongs to you. How do you want to play this?" "Clara." For the first time in her life, Clara held the power of absolute destruction in her hands. She thought of the freezing sleet. She thought of the duffel bag in the puddle. She thought of Chloe's smirking face. Clara stood up, She was still a large woman, taking up space, but she no longer wanted to shrink. She carried her weight now, not as a burden, but as an anchor. "I don't want him dead, Arton," Clara said firmly. "Death is too quick. David loves his status. He loves his money, his tailored suits, and his pristine reputation. I want to take it all. I want him to know exactly who dismantled his life." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Arton's face. He crossed the room, stopping mere inches from her. He reached out his knuckles, gently brushing against her cheek. "Then we dismantle him together, Maya Regina." Friday night at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse on Rush Street was reserved for Houston's elite. It was a loud, opulent symphony of clinking, crystal-expensive steaks and corporate posturing. David Rossi sat at a prime center table, sipping a $50 glass of Cabernet, basking in his new reality. Across from him, Chloe was laughing at a joke he'd made her tiny frame, draped in a designer dress paid for by his new regional director salary. Life was perfect. Shedding Clara had been the best career move he'd ever made, so the VP said if I keep these quarterlies up, we'll be looking at a house in Winnetka. By spring, David boasted, slicing into his ribeye. "That's amazing, baby," Chloe cooed, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Then, the ambient noise in the restaurant subtly shifted. The frantic energy dipped, replaced by a tense, nervous murmur. The maitre d' practically tripped over himself, rushing toward the entrance. David glanced up, annoyed by the interruption. His breath hitched in his throat. Walking into the dining room was Arton Costello. David knew the face from whispered warnings in the financial district. Costello was a man you never wanted to share a room with, let alone a ledger. He exuded raw, terrifying power, dressed in a midnight blue suit, his presence commanding absolute submission from the room. But it wasn't Arton that made David drop his steak knife. It was the woman on his arm. Clara walked through the tables with her head held high. She wore a stunning, custom-tailored crimson wrap dress that commanded attention. She was big-bowled and entirely unapologetic. Her hair was styled in sleek waves, and her lips were painted a sharp, confident red. She didn't look like the broken, weeping woman he had locked out in the rain. She looked like royalty. David's mind short-circuited. Clara, with Arton Costello. Arton guided Clara directly toward David's table. The two bodyguards flanking them stopped a few feet away, crossing their arms. "David," Clara said, her voice cool and carrying perfectly over the quiet dining room. David scrambled to stand up, his napkin falling to the floor. Chloe looked frantically between them. "Clara, what? What the hell is going on? How did you get in here?" "I own the restaurant," David, Arton answered for her. His voice deadpan. He pulled out a chair for Clara, who sat down, gracefully, completely ignoring Chloe. Arton remained standing, a dark sentinel at her shoulder. "You're Arton Costello," David stammered, his arrogant veneer cracking, instantly, sweat beading on his forehead. I don't understand." "My associate here," Arton gestured to Clara, "has been reviewing the Meridian financial portfolios, specifically the accounts you've been approving for the past month." David turned ashen. I just sign the authorizations. The client brings the money in." "The client is Dominic Gallo," Clara interrupted, leaning forward, her eyes locking onto David's terrified face. "He's been stealing from Mr. Costello and using your signature to wash the funds. You didn't do your due diligence, David. You saw the bonuses you wanted to impress your little girlfriend, and you signed off on $30 million of stolen Mafia money." Chloe gasped, shrinking back in her chair. "No, no, no," David pleaded, his voice cracking, looking desperately at Arton. "Mr. Costello, I swear to God I didn't know. I didn't know it was your money. I can fix it. Let me fix it." You can't fix it, David, Clara said softly, a devastating smile playing on her lips. She reached into a crimson clutch and pulled out a thick, sealed manila envelope. She dropped it on the white linen tablecloth. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "What is that?" David whispered. "That is a heavily documented, completely traceable portfolio of your signature authorizing federal money laundering," Clara stated. "I spent the afternoon forwarding copies to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the FBI Field Office, and the CEO of Meridian Financial. Mr. Costello's assets have already been cleanly insulated and routed elsewhere. But your name is on every single dirty dime left at the scene of the crime." David fell back into his chair, the blood draining from his face entirely. "The feds, Clara, they'll give me 20 years. My career, my life. You're destroying me. You threw me in the garbage, David," Clara said, her voice dropping to a fierce, icy register. "You told me I was useless. You told me I was nothing but a fat embarrassment. But it turns out my brain is worth more than your entire existence. I didn't destroy you. I just let you destroy yourself." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, echoing off the concrete canyons of Rush Street. Arton placed a proprietary gentle hand on Clara's shoulder. He looked down at the ruined, pathetic man sweating at the table. "You had a queen in your house, David," Arton said coldly, "and you treated her like a pawn. Enjoy federal prison." Arton offered his hand to Clara. She took it, rising gracefully from the table. She didn't look back at David as he buried his face in his hands, nor at Chloe, who was already inching out of her chair to distance herself from the doomed man. As they walked out into the cool Houston night, the flashing red and blue lights of federal cruisers pulling up to the restaurant illuminated the street. Arton turned to her, pulling her close against his side. "How do you feel, Clara?" She looked up at the man who had seen her worth when she was at her lowest, who had handed her the tools to reclaim her empire. She was heavy, she was brilliant, and she was deeply, irrevocably loved by the most dangerous man in the city. "I feel light," Clara smiled, resting her head against his chest. "Take me home." If Clara's incredible journey of reclaiming her power and proving that true worth comes from within gave you chills, you are not alone. Don't let society or toxic partners dictate your value. Hit that like button if you loved seeing David get exactly what he deserved. Share this story to empower someone who needs a reminder of their own brilliance, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, real-life revenge stories that will leave you breathless.